It's alive! It's alive! And sounds kind of funny. That was fire!
Spaghetti, 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 paschetti, pastrami.
Oh, don't say that. It's lunchtime. Right, Easter Jeep Safari is over. We are back in the shop, which means we are back on Lemonhead, Dime. Even the idea of bass boat came up because of the fiberglass. Hopefully, fingers crossed, and we know that this doesn't always work this way, today is going to be first fire up of the Buick 225 Dauntless. So, we have a few steps though we have to do before we can safely do that, and that's what today's project is. That includes some new radiator hoses that replace the old radiator hoses. We're going to take apart the T that was done here for the heater that you saw mounted in the interior on the prior video, because this T just isn't going to work. So Kenneth, what else do we need to do?
Finishing up the cooling system plumbing and refilling the radiators, kind of a key necessary thing. Probably want to pull the spark plugs, maybe even do a compression test on the engine, see where it's at, make sure it's at least marginally healthy. We also need to trace down all of the electrical on this. So the V6 is not an original engine to this vehicle, and all the wiring is not original. So we need to kind of track down essentially what circuits are even going to be necessary to engage the starter, to engage the ignition system, and all of that. So yeah, we'll be working through getting it to where we can turn the engine over safely, then sort of evaluating the health of the engine itself, and then electrical to get to a point where we think we actually have power to the coil, power to the starter, power to the various other systems to be able to maybe see a spark and then to get towards a first fire.
So we're spending a lot of time on this engine. Do you think this is an engine we're going to be going forward with for a while?
It's all about what we find in terms of the health of the motor. If it's a good, solid, healthy motor, these Buick V6s were good engines. If the motor's not healthy, then we're onto a completely different track, and we'll figure out where we're at.
Might even be behind you.
It might. Again, that remains to be seen. We also haven't gone through the fuel system on this one yet either, to know how much crud might be in the gas tank, might be in the fuel lines. But we're going to start with the cooling system because we've got to finish the fluid change out so that we're not pumping old, rusty fluid through the system.
Okay, sounds like that's where we start. You know, with all the involvement of VJS, we completely forgot. Did we actually put engine oil in the engine? What's the answer, Kenneth?
Well, there's definitely something in it, and it looks clean.
Well, that's good.
I will say, the dipstick tube on this one is borderline hidden.
So Kenneth, why is this T here? Can you explain it better?
So that is part of the other or auxiliary heater system that was installed on this Jeep. And they had a secondary heater core actually behind the seats.
That was the thing I didn't know how to remove when I was doing the cleanup.
Right.
And so I just left it alone, and I'm glad I did because it was full of antifreeze. I thought it was electrical when I first saw it.
Yeah. No, that's a... So what they did was they teed into the heater lines to provide hot water for that auxiliary.
Right. And while I was setting up a new camera angle, he managed to get the first one done.
Hose pliers for the win. I'm gonna thread this in kind of this way.
Oh, you didn't take the other one off yet?
No, one at a time.
One at a time.
That way you get everything reconnected in the same place.
I get that. It's just a little nipple off the block here that you're going to.
Actually, it's on the water pump.
Oh, I see.
And I'm gonna need you to work this on here, because I don't quite have the strength of Xterra, because it's gonna need to stretch over that nipple.
Do we have a tool that stretches it like I've seen on other applications?
No.
It's funny, earlier off camera I asked a question, is it easier to work on this without stuff in the way? The answer is yes.
I'm just gonna warm it up, which will make it a little more pliable. And we'll apply some, actually,
Lube first.
yeah, let's apply some soap. Push. You gotta kind of work it back and forth a little bit. So probably a situation where the Buick has a 3/4 inch fitting, and of course the Jeep has 5/8 fittings. So things are just, the hose is just a little tight.
And those hose pliers came in clutch yet again. Okay. That end is secure. That went on a lot easier.
Because this one's the right size.
Second verse, same as the first. Time to do the other side. Oh, those really do help.
Part of the trick to this whole thing is to not damage the hose while we're doing this.
Nobody wants a damaged hose.
Well, this one ended up being
Well, hold, band clamp first.
good call. Good call. And there are a lot of special heater hoses out there to buy.
Just this application doesn't need it.
Okay.
All right, heater hose T's are fixed.
Deleted and new, fresh, not 30-year-old hoses are installed.
All right, what's next on the list?
The lower radiator hose, which was the shorter of the two, right?
Believe so.
Lower, upper.
You actually labeled them.
The lower.
Yep, that's
lower.
lower.
Is the shorter one. Okay, I don't have.
Yep.
So this hose needs to go on that connector. Should slide
I see.
on relatively easy, but
it's got a interference here.
there's an interference at the bottom with the radiator.
And did you see it's crimped?
That kink should straighten out as it slides onto the water pump.
Okay. Got this belly puncher over here.
Yep.
Okay, seriously, this is difficult.
As far on as it is going to go. We do have a little bit of a restriction here, but I think given the way this is angled and coming out this way, without this being a molded hose, I think that's what we're going to live with. It might be a little bit better if we were to shorten this some, but we also don't have a lot that we could trim off the end of this hose, and it is a universal hose.
And now the upper radiator hose, which to me seems like it might, fingers crossed, be the easiest one.
And you've got...
I've got 2 band clamps right here.
Okay.
That wasn't all that hard. What are we doing, saving the best for last?
Something like that.
Oh, that broke.
Okay. It's a vacuum line. Remember where that was and where it went.
Well, we knew some of this rubber was delicate. That's why we're replacing it. Okay, upper.
So then, another clamp.
There we go.
And ideally for this engine, we would have a different radiator.
We may yet have a different radiator. Who knows if this one actually even works?
Okay, so that closes up the cooling system.
Yep.
For 1940 or 1960, whatever we're dealing with, good old trusty green antifreeze. That could be the only vehicle around this place that uses this stuff.
Right.
Everything else is using the
Dex.
well, either the hybrid or the full organic.
Do we know the capacity?
Nope.
Good luck.
Because you'll never know other than a swapped engine from any written documentation.
I wonder if we had thought about this. Should we have started with the water? That way, if there's any leaks, we're just losing water.
That would be fair. We're beyond that point now.
Yeah, I agree.
And realistically, there's an argument here to actually have done a flush rather than going directly to coolant. But we're still in a freezing season, so I don't want straight water in this engine.
It's early in April, and we're still in a freezing season. Welcome to Denver. We have to be very, very careful about antifreeze, especially this older stuff.
Quite toxic to pets.
Yep, and you know we have shop dogs.
Okay, I think for the moment we're going to call that adequate.
Yippee! So, quick repair job. I'm putting on the radiator hoses. We broke that vacuum tube. It just like snapped in two, crumbled in the fingers, as old rubber will do. We have some rubber on hand. And Kenneth is basically doing the same thing as radiator hoses. Just making sure we have the right size.
Yeah, that one's a better fit.
Excellent. And trim to fit. And it'll go back over in there.
Direction does the spaghetti go?
I'm feeling we're gonna have more of these vacuum lines to replace. Updated rubber. Younger rubber. What is that vacuum tube for?
So it's connecting to the vacuum advance on the distributor.
Oh, well then that would be very important for first start. So Kenneth is currently labeling or putting tags on for labeling for the wires, the spark plug wires. We have a towel set up so that when we take the spark plugs out, we know where it's gone. And I am Noting on the distributor that it is numbered. It goes counterclockwise. 1 is right here, 6 is right here. And I am to chase them down and make sure that 1 goes to 1, etc.
So this should be 1.
No, that's 2. That is definitely 2.
Huh.
This is 1, and 1 is this first one right here.
Oh, is that how they've labeled them? Okay.
So 2 is over there. 3 comes back over here and is the middle one here.
In which case, then this one should
4 should be this one.
4. Okay.
Okay. 5 comes back around and is the back one here.
And
And
6.
6 should be this one right here. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay.
According to the numbers on the distributor here.
Which is fine. That tells us how the cylinders.
Mind you, we don't know if the distributor is set up right. We don't know if somebody just slapped it on the engine and said, I'm done with it.
We just want to make sure that everything goes back the way it was.
Yeah, and then we can diagnose later.
And then 1.
So on the block here, I don't know if you can see it or not.
So then this should be
I'm going to bring you down here. Hold on.
2.
So the block actually has the firing order on it. 1, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. So we know that information as well. And I guess that's why they call these things odd fire engines.
Well, so think that through. Now that we've identified which spark plug is which. So our firing order, again, that is labeled here, is 1, 6. Then it's going to go to 5. Then it's going to go to 4. Then it's going to go to 3. Then it's going to go to 2. So that's actually a firing order that is basically alternating across the engine.
Yeah, when we initially were counting this, we were thinking it was one bank, then the other bank, but we were definitely wrong.
Given the way they've labeled the cylinders, because again, normally I'm used to them being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So they've labeled the cylinders opposite banks, or at least that appears to be the case, in which case the firing order makes more sense, because it is alternating across the cylinders, across the block like you would expect.
So we are now labeled.
Yep.
Both block, tag,
Valve
valve cover, yeah, you're right, tag, and now it's time to start taking out spark plugs.
Spaghetti, 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 paschetti, pastrami.
Oh, don't say that, it's lunchtime. Twist, then pull, not twist and pull. Okay, well, we have an identifier on the spark plug, makes it easier to replace them if that's what we choose to do. This is number 4. I'm just going to set it there, get all of them in place, and then take a closer look at them.
We know from when we were loading the vehicle that the engine itself is not seized. It will turn over. We did that kind of accidentally because it was in gear when we hooked a winch up to it and started dragging the vehicle, unloading it. So we do know that the engine is not seized. The easiest way to turn the engine over for the compression test is to use the starter. So, and with all of the cleaning April did, we now know where the battery cables are because they're not under the hood. In theory, one of these should be a ground and one should be a positive. They are substantially different sizes, but our next order of business is to try to figure out which is which, because we're going to need to put a battery in the vehicle to hopefully crank the starter. So I need to figure out which one of these is our ground.
And I came over here to show you the difference in sizes a little bit more closely. There's the difference in sizes. One of them is almost literally twice the size as the other.
So about 60 ohms resistance between that lead and this one. Is a half an ohm. Well, it's all over the place actually. So I think this is ground.
The thinner wire's the ground, the heavier wire's the
hot. Stand clear. Battery's weak.
Yeah, but that's why we have it on the charger. As Kenneth just pointed out, the good news is starter works. Don't have to replace that just yet. Okay, so for the compression test, that screws in its place, and you have this meter. I see.
So there's nothing here that's really exceptional. This is a spark plug adapter that connects to the engine, and then just a air hose to a gauge. And the whole idea is how much pressure does the engine build when it's cranking over.
Agreed.
We're going to see how well this works with our weak battery. Works any better.
Battery ain't helping us. Maybe we should have picked up a battery while we were picking up the tools.
Possibly.
Back in the shop with a third battery.
This one's out of a running vehicle.
Yeah, everyone's got their collection of discarded batteries. We're no exception. However, this one was brand new in a vehicle that got parked. So hopefully it's got enough to get us through this compression test. Okay, cylinder 1 test.
This is actually cylinder 4.
Cylinder 4 test.
I'm going to call that 105.
Okay. Cylinder 1 was 90. This is 105. Okay. Okay, I'm going to show you the gauge. Kenneth's going to get started, but then he wants me to show you something else.
See it from your point of view, I can certainly see it from mine.
100? 100? Yeah, it looks like 100 to me.
Actually, that's the 105 mark.
105, okay. 105. We'll come back to this in a sec. Giving another view of what we got going on here. Oh, I got sparked.
Well, I think your fingers were down in the fan.
No, I got sparked up here.
Okay.
It was this arm that got hit.
Yes, pay attention to where the fan is.
I see the fan. I hear it, I don't see it. Oh, there it is.
So what's interesting about that is that the ignition on this vehicle should be off. So there should be nothing at the coil to cause those sparks.
Compression test results.
All right. So this is what we've got going on here. And remember that the way these plugs are numbered is across the banks. We're 15 psi highest to lowest across any, and then adjacent cylinders in the same bank is 90, 95, 105, 90, 105, 100. So we do definitely have some variance from cylinder to cylinder. On the whole, it's relatively consistent across the engine. So it's not like we've got one low cylinder that looks to be unreasonably low relative to the others. I need to look up what the specs on this engine are, because I have to admit a 90 psi does not sound like great compression to me. You know, we tend to run, we're at, you know, 5,000, 6,000 feet here. So we tend to be about 10, 11 psi is our ambient. So that would suggest we're in a, you know, an 8 to 9 to 1 sort of range for compression. That strikes us a little low, but it's not terrible. So it may be good enough to at least to fire. So as far as the plug condition themselves, yeah, this one's pretty much what looks like a normal plug, number 5 here. Number 6 has got a little bit more carbon on it. It might have been running just a little bit richer, which again, slightly lower compression in this cylinder. Cylinder 4 is those got a little bit more, again, a little bit more carbon to it, a little darker. Cylinder 3 actually looks pretty normal to me, not bad by any means. Cylinder 2, again, it's got maybe a little bit more carbon to it, but not bad. Cylinder 1 looks there. Again, to me, on the whole, these look reasonable for used plugs. There's nothing there that looks just way outstanding. They're not wet, they're not dripping. If they were, I'd be really surprised after having sat for so long. But they're not, you know, again, they're not massively fouled or indications of oil burning or anything like that. They look like used, well-used plugs. And that is the bottom of the fuel fitting that was positioned in such a way that you could not remove the fuel tank without taking that out.
Looks like you're doing a new piece of fuel line there.
Right. So what they did is they got this piece of hard line, which on the surface looks to be okay, and they went to a piece of rubber and then another piece of hard line along the frame. Now, when we come back up in the front, we've replaced the rubber from the hard line. Well, we've replaced the rubber so far from the fuel pump to the filter, which are kind of in the reverse order. Normally you would have the filter in front of your fuel pump, but anyway, we've replaced that. We've replaced all of this going to the carburetor, and again, there's just this little piece of rubber down here between the hard line and the fuel pump. So eventually we'll replace that as well, but because I have this right in my hand, I'm replacing this small segment of rubber that they've got between the fuel tank and the chassis hardline. We'll put this back together, and with having now drained the fuel tank, put the fuel tank back in the Jeep, put this back in place, and we should be able to use the fuel tank that's here.
And I actually have fuel for it.
And the initial look at the interior of the fuel tank didn't look too bad, which is, again, pretty impressive for its age. Kaiser Willys and see if we can get new trim piece for that.
As well as a new gas cap. So this is why the talk of the gas cap. We had to drill it out.
Yeah.
Apparently Kenneth got something in his mouth.
Hook this back up because the easiest way to not lose where it goes is if it's connected. So I'm guessing that must be the fuel gauge.
The other thing that we got when we went to the store is spark plugs. And he's installing them now.
By Braille.
Pretty much. We also ordered a couple of other things that just weren't in stock. For instance, the spark plug wires. We'll get some of those tomorrow. We did also pick up a new serpentine belt, which we will be installing later. Well, soon, shortly, because we have no idea how old this one is. And we ordered an air filter. From a what, Kenneth?
They said it fits a Harley.
Yeah, an air filter from a Harley Davidson. That's based on purely on measurements. That ought to be interesting. Get that tomorrow as well. You've got a keeper on your side.
And none on
I
yours.
don't have one on mine, but maybe the new plug wires will have their own keeper.
Maybe.
Oh, he's got his thinking cap on now.
Question at this point is, do we have spark?
Damn it, stop. The light behind you is darkening. Throw this video away.
Pull this lever. That's headlights.
It might be, but it ain't. Wouldn't surprise me if I need new headlights, though. What he's looking for.
I do not have anything that looks like a choke. But I have a thing that is definitely a choke that looks like it is tied into our throttle linkage. So this looks like it may be set up with what is supposed to be an automatic choke.
I didn't even know such a thing existed.
Well, it was a more modern thing. Well, we're talking more modern as in 60s, 70s kind of thing.
What is this new tool you have purchased?
It's an inline spark tester. So what this is basically supposed to do is show me whether or not we have spark, or whether or not we have ignition being provided to an individual plug. This is something I had wanted when troubleshooting another vehicle recently, but it'll answer for us once and for all the question of, are we actually providing spark as this engine is turning over at the moment? And that should say plug 1 there.
It does. Now this is just for us knowing for first fire, we have new plugs on order.
Or new wires.
Yeah, plug wires, yeah.
Okay. So what we should see when we crank it over, if we've got it ignition, is a spark activity happening there.
I got it. I think I'm seeing it.
Oh, I'm definitely seeing it.
Oh, I know. I saw it with my eyes, too, whether or not the GoPro saw it. Okay, we're going to repeat for the other 6. Well, other 5.
So, no fuel supply yet because our carburetor is not running, but we've got spark. If you have compression, and you have fuel, and you have spark, you have an engine that runs. I've got spark, I've got compression, I've got fuel.
That's fuel?
Starting fluid
Okay.
is fuel.
Woo!
we have an interesting behavior at this point. We have a vehicle whose ignition is hot, with no key in the ignition at this point. So there's something in terms of either the ignition switch is on currently and the ignition is hot, or it's been wired in such a way that the ignition is hot when the key is off. It could be that the key only controls the fuel pump. It could be that there's something else going on. So we're now into electrical troubleshooting to understand. What we've discovered though is, again, the start button is hot even with no key in the ignition, and given fuel, the motor appears to want to run. So we need to figure this out before we actually give it a fuel source, because if it did start, we might not be able to turn it off.
Now remember, we weren't given a key with this vehicle. It has long been lost. He's hot wiring it. Ooh. That is the fuel pump making fuel pumping.
So this is a vehicle that we assume has not been operating for close to 30 years. We just put power to the fuel pump for the first time, and it did eventually pull fuel through, and we saw it percolate through, and then we saw it start burping out of that hole. That is probably, if not definitely, the fuel bowl vent. When the air filter plate sits on top of this, there's a tube that comes down from the air filter that I think matches up with that. So that would cause it to draw any extra fumes or any vapors that are coming off of the fuel bowl into the engine, into the carburetor. At this point, most likely our float valve on the fuel bowl, which controls whether or not fuel is allowed to enter the fuel bowl, is most likely stuck open. At least that would be the best guess as to why we would have it just start dumping fuel out of the top of the fuel bowl. However, that means we've got fuel to the carburetor. Again, we've learned something important about this vehicle in that A, the fuel pump does work. B, it kind of looks like maybe the way it was set up was you turn the ignition off, that shut off the fuel pump, and then eventually the engine stops. That might not be the most desirable way to have this work. So this is the bottom of the air filter assembly with this one. And notice it's got this nub here. When this goes on, lines up with the intake, that nub sits right there. We've now got a fuel bowl full of fuel. A hot wired pump that is off and is going to remain off as we do this. And a pyromaniac with some starting fluid. This might run just a hair longer this time. That is starting to work a lot better too.
It's alive! It's alive! And sounds kind of funny.
That was odd.
Well, it is an odd fire machine.
Well, more to the... It definitely ran. That was definitely the engine running. But it was odd that it's like it didn't want to run if I wasn't holding the starter button down. That's odd. So if I don't mess with the throttle...
Boy, that sounded good.
Need to give it some gas again. I heard it turn on.
Mm-hmm, I did too. I heard some gurgling.
As soon as I let off the button here, it dies.
That was fire!
Okay, I think we need to spend a little bit more time diagnosing the electrical configuration on this, but it acts like it wants to run.
I agree. Good job, Kenneth. This is now officially the oldest engine, or the engine that sat the longest that you've gotten to this point.
For sure.
Because the MJ was only like, what, 11, 13 years, something like that?
For sure. Yep.
So, quite an accomplishment. Amazing work. Thank you.